The chariot flipping over and Percy getting dragged. They're doing all those stunts on set. The chariot race is this incredible action set piece from episode 2. And it was one that within the original book, it was such a big part of the story.
The three important things of the chariot sequence were being grounded and feeling real, actor safety, and especially given that our principal cast are young folk. If they were older, we might put them through a little bit more than what we did with it, but they had to be safe. It was really important that they were safe. And the third really important aspect was animal safety as well. Now, in that 26 version of Ben-Hur, 100 to 150 horses died shooting that sequence. We didn't even want to injure a horse, so that was really important. Now, how did we shoot the actual race itself? Well, we used a variety of things. We had real horses hauling real chariots. Now, those horses, we would run for a maximum of 2 to 3 laps before we swapped the horses out, because it's hard work. It's like you doing a 400-meter race and hauling a sled. Horses are trained for it, but still, we wanted to have healthy horses that could circulate and redo it. They would run for about 2 laps before they were swapped out. Now, what do we do with our cast? So we have real chariots and we have real horses. They're stunt doubles that are in those horses, and we would see them in the back of shot and to the side of shot. So we came up with this idea, much like you put a motor vehicle on a trailer and then drive around the streets of Vancouver. That's called an insert vehicle, or in Australia we call it a low loader. Our special effects guru, James Paradis, came up with this great idea. Why don't we make an insert vehicle for chariots? And so he built this trailer, and on this trailer we would put the 2 chariot cabins, no wheels, and he had a pulley system. So one of the chariots could travel north-south along the trailer, and the other one could travel east-west, and at a distance of about 6 feet, right? But that was enough to be able to shoot on that trailer with cameras, no horses in foreground, just seeing our cast from, say, a mid-shot into close-up, and we were able to jockey those chariots. So not only could we give the impression that they're racing, but when Clarice and Percy, when their 2 chariots come together and Tyson and Clarice are fighting, then we could shoot that safely on the low loader. Now, in front of the chariots, of course, you've got the big truck that you always have to hold the vehicle, and on that you've got the monitors, and I'm there with the director and the first AD. And then on the trailers, we tested a whole bunch of different rigs, but we wanted an immediacy to the feel when we're shooting their close-ups. And this comes back to that sense of being grounded. We didn't want to use remote heads to shoot them. We wanted some life and some energy in the frame. Now, handheld, there was too much agitation. There's no suspension in these chariots. And even on the low loader, where there is minimal suspension, flying across a field can get pretty bumpy. So we had 2 Steadicam operators operating right in front of the chariots. So they got the sense of being somewhat handheld but somewhat stabilized. And so we would haul the chariots on our insert vehicle, and then behind in the background we would have stunt performers in chariots being hauled by horses.
For us, it was a sequence where we were involved really end to end, starting from previs. And then we were the main vendor responsible for the Stymphalian birds and their attacking of the crowd and all the choreography and action that happens there. And then, of course, Tyson throughout the entire show, we were responsible for. I think from the start of previs, we probably put about 8 to 9 months into it, probably close to a year. And the timeline doesn't necessarily represent the size of crew as well. Like, previs starts with maybe a team of 4, but when we're in full shot production, you might have 30 or 40 people working on that sequence with all the different components that need to go in there.
You want to get out of this cabin?
That's against the rules.
I can fix that.
I think our approach and sort of what we talked to Daniel about, the actor for Tyson, was that you get the performance that you want on set, and we will absolutely make sure that that translates faithfully to his Cyclops eye.
The ILM gave us a lot of freedom with Dan, who played Tyson, and shooting him. But there were a couple of things they said were difficult. Now, if we were shooting him front on or 3/4, and we could see both of his eyes, then that was, when I say relatively easy, I mean, for those guys, it's ILM. in their scale of, easy to incredibly difficult, that was up there and that's pretty cool. And they were using some kind of software that they had built and created where as long as we saw both of his eyes, then they turned two eyes into one eye. And it wasn't full 3D, CG, animation. It was using Dan's two eyes to create one. Now, where that became really difficult for them was in really low light situations, or when we were shooting a profile of Dan and they could only see one eye, then they would have to go to full CG with his eyes. But otherwise, they said, just shoot him like you would normally shoot any actor. And we'll step in and we'll let you know when it's becoming problematic. And if it's problematic and you really need the shot, then do it and we will solve the problem.
It was a long road for us. We had a lot of artists involved in translating all of his expressions into a Cyclops format. So Daniel was amazing, so collaborative with us. We did a test in the very early days just to see how's this going to work. And he did such a great job with his delivery and his performance that you could watch the episode and Tyson is already compelling, even with just two eyes. So our job was really to make sure that nothing was lost in the translation of making that into one eye. So for us, a lot of work up front was taking Daniel through a lot of facial calisthenics. So all the different expressions and dialogue that he might say or do, let's say a furrowed brow when he's confused or angry. Those two emotions are very close to each other in terms of facial expression. And then recreating that on our CG Cyclops eye was a very nuanced process in terms of okay, when you have two eyes and your eyebrows can do something different, how do we translate that eyebrow shape into one eyebrow across the whole thing? That was a very long process for us. But what was great about it is that once we established that relationship where we could watch side by side him doing all this training performance and then us recreating that as a Cyclops and feel like the emotional component was there, we knew it would work for the show. And I think when people watch the show, it takes your brain a little bit of time to get used to a Cyclops. There's something about one eye that messes with our interior psychology. But what's amazing about watching Daniel's Tyson is that you kind of forget about it very quickly. And he's so present in those early episodes that he just becomes a character and it becomes very natural. And for us, the beauty of it is that people get to see Daniel's performance underneath this application that we've put on. We really tried to treat it almost like prosthetic makeup in terms of augmenting his performance.
We didn't really have to do anything special except one thing. This thing that we called Tyson time. So at the end of every setup, if Dan was in the shot, then Andrew, our dramaturg, would come on and go, right, let's do some Tyson time. And we'd put one camera on him. And so Andrew would ask him a different question every time. Dan, tell us about your favorite movies. And so we would roll the camera and Dan would stand there in the lighting setup that we'd done. And he would go, okay, my favorite film is Apocalypse Now. I love the characters in that film. It's a war film, and Andrew would be pointing, and that was for Dan to actually point his head in various angles so they could capture all. And he was talking like he would normally, and so the camera would capture him in all those positions in those lighting setups. And they would use that shot somehow to inform the software that they were using for every camera angle. And it was just one of those extra things that we had to do. And we loved Tyson time because we learned a lot about Dan. and the funny thing is, at the end of every sequence, right, it's like, okay, we're moving on, and people would start working. But for that kind of 30 seconds or a minute, everyone would stop and be crowded around camera listening to Dan. And it was just this fabulous, over the course of the season, it was this fabulous insight into this really amazing guy. Dan, he's such a lovely man, but so smart and so articulate. And Andrew threw some curly questions at him, typical questions. We didn't, how did that as one split an atom? Dan, tell us about that. Nothing, too mind-boggling, but often, personal things just about his life and his childhood and whatnot. And it was just a great way to get to know this fantastic bloke.
Our main approach was to say wherever Daniel looks is where Tyson is going to look. And that generally works. However, when you go from like 2 smaller eyes to 1 big eye, there are times when we need to make subtle sightline adjustments. And we had a few different tools where we could take the motion that Daniel did. So that might include all the little eye darts and things that make a human eye feel alive, and just provide an override. So keep all that motion, but maybe just have it turn a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right if we needed to correct an eye line that felt off once we saw it on a much larger representation of the eye. We watched lots and lots of flocking videos and nature reference in terms of how we drove the crowds. But they do some interesting things that are a little bit non-bird-like, where they're all trying to funnel down and kind of punch through the shield around the camp. For that, we actually looked at different natural reference in terms of like whirlpools and movement like that. We're trying to focus energy in one place. The design of the creatures was started in our apartment here at ILM, and it really started with, let's just go to nature and get a wide variety of the weirdest birds we can find. And, you know, kind of pick and choose the elements that we felt like were most representative for this bird. So you don't get a lot of time to see them clearly because they're always in motion. But they have a metallic beak and they have kind of a metallic forehead to give them a more aggressive feel than a typical bird. And then certainly the razor teeth are a big part of it. We wanted them to feel threatening, and when they're attacking the camp, that it's a big problem within the sequence. And it plays such a large part of the Chariot race and the solution that they have to come up with to get past them. So we continually tried to make sure that they looked like plausibly real creatures, but also maybe a little more interesting than just a simple bird would have been.
Something like a swarm of birds. You know, you've got shadow effects that they cast. We used a variety of gobos, I guess. I used a 12 by fly swatter, so it's a machine that's holding up a fly swatter, which is a big frame. On that, I had a whole bunch of bird cutouts or rough shapes of birds, like effectively a gobo, and we could move that quite quickly if I was doing some close work on a character, but also just like flags, different shaped flags to swoop over various characters. So I would use practical lighting instruments like that, which are kind of all homemade to a point. And then Eric Henry's VFX would provide the rest. And at times he would say, listen, don't worry about that. I can take care of that. Or listen, I need some shadow because we're close. And this is going to be more difficult, and it's probably much faster and easier and cost-effective for you to do it. So it was just working hand in glove with Eric on the best times to do that practically and the times to do that in post.
One of the things that's nice is that because our previs now is much more sophisticated, we actually had representations of the crowds of birds in there. So when you're gathering all your background and a lot of the kids that were on set, you could show them like, hey, this is what's happening all around you, and then do your best to direct that action. And there were some that were just react like there's birds around you, and then other moments that were very specifically choreographed into bird action. But the fun part on our side is that we'll often take what's shot where they're imagining where the birds are, and then we look for opportunities to provide that interaction. So if one kid is like trying to swat one away, we'll add a bird there getting hit by their hand and pushed away and then come back to attack them. One of the really fun things that we did for the sequence was green screen and shoot additional hair elements getting lifted up and pulled so that we could add hair to what was shot in the plate and see the birds actually grab hair or take little boxes of popcorn and knock those over. It's all about every opportunity we can find where the birds can interact with something that you see represented in the frame, makes them much more believable. You can do a live overlay, and you can even do like a live tracked camera. In this case, we were outside in the elements, and you kind of want to stay as nimble and fast as possible. So in this particular case, it was like more of a reference and inspiration. Also, to some degree, try and let the process be as organic as possible, because we don't want to over-constrain people to feeling like, oh, I have to react to sometimes almost too much direction becomes confusing. And if we just say, you're getting attacked by this flock of birds, you give them a sense of how they're all around them, they'll do fantastic stuff. And like we had kids diving to the ground and moving out of the way and, swatting these birds. So our work after the fact was just to kind of go through and study the sequence and look for the opportunities where it looks like the bird is motivating something, but in fact, we're animating the bird to react to something that the actors did. One of the great things about the show is the stunts team. We'll come up with the ideas in previs and maybe take a guess what we might have to do digitally. And then we hand it to the stunts team and they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. And I was like, that's incredible. So the chariot flipping over and Percy getting dragged, they're doing all those stunts on set. And most of our work is painting out safety cables and, getting rid of mats that slide on the ground, for our characters to be on. But where the sequence really works is that those things were all shot on set. And our job is just to augment with explosions and things that, they might not necessarily be able to do. To me, that's why it looks so good, is because they were able to do so much of it out there.
In Vancouver, if you're shooting in an exterior, you can expect rain, hail, shine, snow, all on the same day. So dust in the air during a horse race or a chariot race, anything that's flying through the air will give agitation to the frame as well and make it more exciting. So when we first started shooting, it was really hot and it was dusty, and naturally we just got a bit of that. And to an extent, we actually had to wet down the track a little bit. Otherwise, it just got so dusty that you really couldn't see what was going on. When it started raining, then there'll be no dust in the air. So that was a problem. Or after rain, or it's been raining overnight. And so then we would have to attach little dust, I think it's diatomaceous earth or something that they use, little dust buckets attached to the chariots or just in front of the chariots on the insert or on the truck, and release this dust to have the particulate flying through the air and to give the frame some agitation. So what nature didn't provide it on certain days, we had to provide.
They have a dedicated VFX supervisor on set. On season 1, I was on set almost the entire season because we did all of the volume work. This season, I wasn't on set as much, but I was more for that sequence because I knew we were also going to be doing a large percentage of the visual effects work for it. But yeah, there's always a dedicated VFX supervisor that's there on set to collaborate and just make sure maybe we don't use quite so much dust, in this shot because we're going to have to add a lot of extra elements to it. There's a lot that goes into that calculation of when to use the volume. And I was a very big advocate for when not to use it. It kind of has to be the right fit. And we still did do LED wall work for this season. But I think this story in book 2 had a very different sort of through line where you're not going to do a chariot race on a volume for sure. And you kind of do that calculation in terms of what is our action through most of the sequence, and is it the right tool for the job? So where we still needed it, like in the taxi cab, we absolutely used it to great effect, but it wasn't as focused as it was in season 1, where we had all of these different environments like the Med interior or the Tunnel of Love that were just perfect fits for it.
With sequences like this, the most important thing is you've got to make it exciting. And how do you do that? Because you can't always be galloping at 60 miles an hour. There are safety issues of physics. If you've got 2 horses and they're hauling a chariot that's made from fiberglass and has a steel structure underneath with proper wooden chariot wheels with metal strips, that's a lot of weight. And the horses can only go so fast. So you've got to use in-camera effects to give the illusion of speed. And we tested a whole bunch of different effects. And in the sequence, there's a recipe that kind of worked for us, depending on the shot. Always with speed, it's do you go super long lens or do you go wide? Now, a wide lens will, especially with growth and decay in the frame, things will grow on you much faster. On a wide lens, will give the illusion of growing on you much faster than on a telephoto lens. But a telephoto lens, as a chariot's flying around a corner and you're panning with that, the background's moving very quickly. And then, of course, there's drama moments that you have to capture. So you've got to give the illusion of speed even with those. So it's lensing. It's also things like shutter angle. So we shot a lot of this at 90 degrees and 45 degrees to give movement in the frame a more static kind of movement. So the classic film to kind of reference for this is Saving Private Ryan. When you see mud flying through the back of shot at a 45-degree shutter angle or a 90-degree, it'll have a more staccatic movement. So it's creating kind of agitation in the frame, which gives the sense of movement. We also played with dropping, so shooting at lower shutter, so under cranking. So shooting at 18, 19, 20 frames and then play back at 24. And that'll make things move faster in the frame. But you've got to be very careful. If you go too far with that, then it can look a little bit like a Charlie Chaplin film.
Our goal is to not really put any constraints on the cinematographer as much as we can. So camera choice, lens choice, what frame rate and aperture they shoot at has a big effect on the look of it. And we generally try and tell them, like, you go for it, kind of create your artistic vision and we'll make sure that our work fits into it. So we're pretty detailed in terms of recreating the color science of all the cameras that we used for the elements that we're adding, but then also making sure we're mapping the lenses and can accurately recreate the blur, the depth of field and lens blur and lens distortion that they have on set. So in that way, we really try and accommodate wherever Jules wants to go with it. We did so much work on this season. I was going through the list with our team in terms of, Percy as a guinea pig and Blackjack, doing the horse's wings and then sometimes full CG. But I'd say, like, overall, the work that I'm really excited for people to see are Tyson and Polyphemus, because they're this, like, fantastic approach of practical makeup and digital effects to augment it. But at the end of the day, making sure that, like, performance translates. Because Tyson carries, he's in so many of the episodes. If his performance felt flat or a little bit lifeless, Dan Schatz told us right up front, like, this character has to work for this season to work. And that is, to me, the most fun work that we can do when it's that collaboration with an actor, where they deliver the performance and then we make sure that translates. Polyphemus was fun because there was a lot of practical makeup as part of his character, but we also shot a lot of, like, old school scale techniques to make him seem much bigger using forced perspective. And it was so fun to combine kind of like the latest digital approaches with some very, very old school approaches to how we accomplish that character. We're just the representative of huge teams of hundreds of people that you see again and again. A deadline's coming up and they just pour art into making these shots look as good as we possibly can, because they know that there's such a huge fan base for this series and that it really matters to them. It's always amazing to me to watch the trailer breakdowns and how many details people pick out when it comes out. And I love that, because that means our attention to detail, really translates for the audience.